Jack, I suppose Ballyea started this year when you heard Reggie was coming back, when you heard Mr. Hogan was coming back, when you heard the whole crew was coming back to Ballyea. What were your sort of thoughts? Were you sort of saying to yourself, right, we've achieved everything we've achieved with this management before? Is there a possibility that we won't be able to replicate the success that we had the first time around?
No, it was a case of getting the band back together again, I suppose. And actually, we all knew what the boys bring. So it was a great opportunity again to knuckle down, I suppose, for the year ahead and see what we could do.
And I suppose Jack being involved in the county scene, obviously with Mr. Lohan and his sort of charges and the sort of commitment that's sort of involved in that. Obviously, it's almost like a 5-day-a-week profession, the way it's sort of gone. During the early stages, was there any way that you were keeping tabs or keeping the feedback of how things were going within the club when you weren't being able to there personally? Were the messages coming back all sorts of positive in terms of, right, this is looking promising so far?
Yeah, absolutely. Sure. Look, I suppose it is the thing in Ballyea. It's hard to kind of balance. I suppose there's a few boys in football and a few boys in hurling, so the lads at the club were there during the league. They were getting results, which was positive. And so look, you try and check in as much as you can, coming to the odd session here and there. But yeah, things were always positive from the year. Like we know, sometimes you can chip a few beatings at the start of the year when you're missing a few, but the boys they never let down the side when they're not around.
I suppose as a player with sort of commitments, obviously you play with Kilmallock footballers in the past as well, not this year with Ballyea hurlers as well. The split season, in terms of the licence and that sort of freedom that is given the likes of yourself, once you know Clare has sort of finished, the hurling club is going to be on after inter-county, does that sort of give you a sort of centre sort of focus where you can sort of focus plan A, when that's over I can sort of focus plan B, not having to play a championship game and then go back to inter-county training or a club game or sort of thing, having that sort of divide, has it been refreshing for you?
Yeah, it's nice. It's nice to, I suppose, be able to focus on one, like you said, and put your all your focus onto one, and then once that's over, you can shift your focus entirely onto the club. Yeah, it's obviously it's been kind of that way, I suppose, for a while. And that's kind of probably the way I suppose you'd have to adapt if you had any other way. But it seems that's probably the smartest way, when you get to focus on one, and then when that's over, you're focused entirely on your club and see what you can do for the year.
And there seems to be a freshness about Ballyea sort of this year, and an awful lot of the elder statements seem sort of fresh. I suppose he had a sort of a good campaign as well with Brian Lohan's charges. You don't seem to be too burnt out from it. You seem fresh and energetic coming into this championship.
There's a great when you come back to your club, you get a great lift and enjoyment out of playing. I suppose that's what there's a great bond between players, and there's a great buzz at training. So I suppose that's what creates that kind of energy, I suppose, that people just love playing it.
And I suppose you're all too well aware of Inagh Kilnamona. You've probably gone up against 2 or 3 lads in county training sessions 2 or 3 nights a week. I suppose they've been a sort of a bridesmaid in terms of Clare hurling in the past few years, knocking on the door, expectations, and sort of there must seem to be a real sort of demand this year that, right, we're going to make that sort of leap. Now they've made one step, they're trying to make the ultimate step, but have you been sort of impressed about the bit of resiliency that Inagh Kilnamona has showed this year, especially Rogue maybe taking down the favourites, 6 Mile Ridge, everyone saying the Townies are on a roll, and yet they could go into their back garden and pick out a victory in the midst of the dogfight?
Oh, absolutely. You couldn't be more impressed with Inagh Kilnamona. They've been definitely the form team in the championship. They've been the ones that everyone has been watching. They've gone through the whole lot unbeaten, I suppose, haven't they? And they look very impressive, and they've been knocking on the door, like you said, for so many years, and there's so much talent there between senior players and underage county stars, and they'll be there for a long time yet.
And I suppose when you look at Ballyea, people probably look at the team that was so successful, like yourself, Paul, Tony, Gary, say James, maybe Brendan. But what struck me this year was the management's trust in the younger players, like Keane Meany has come in, the likes of Peter Casey is taking up a prominent position in the full back line, the likes of Aaron Griffin and Mossy Gavin in the sort of the full forward line, that there's a real sort of sense that these boys got the favouritism of the management during the league, and they have been rewarded. The Ballyea haven't reverted back to type come the championship, in terms of they've sort of rewarded these sort of players for what they've done so far this year.
Yeah, absolutely. There's great, more so than ever this year. I see there's massive numbers of training and everyone is massively competitive, and I suppose testament to the management. If you're putting your hand up and you're knocking on the door, they'll give you a chance, and those boys that are all in there now have got their chance and they've taken their chance and are still there.
And I mentioned this to Robbie, Jack, in terms of morale, and I suppose you're coming off a campaign with the Clare hurlers, yourself, Tony, Paul, with a sort of good morale, but there's some players within your squad who might have had disappointing campaigns in other sort of codes and flirted with relegation. I know a few sort of clubs, other clubs maybe underachieving. When they're coming back, maybe after a heavy defeat, or maybe like this case losing to Camorra Bricken after a sort of heavy loss, is it hard? Do you have to rally around those sort of players to give them that sort of lift? Come on, boys, it's over. Sort of get it out of your heads now. Let's back to hurling. Or in terms of as senior players, do you notice maybe that an effect that a player might have had maybe in the previous week when he had a poor performance or something like that?
No, I think the way most lads look at it, there's no better way of getting over something than getting back in the saddle and getting going again. And I think lads, any of the stuff that happens outside, you park at the gate, you go out to train and you enjoy yourself, and I think there's a massive enjoyment in it, and I think that's why lads look rejuvenated and look fresh here, because they just love what they're doing and enjoy what they're doing.
And I suppose finally for me, Jack, obviously the first time round there was huge celebrations. The place, obviously the local place, went nuts in terms of that. The whole sort of county went on the whole Ballyea sort of roller coaster. The second time around it maybe caught people by a surprise, and it sort of came out of the blue all of a sudden in terms of this time around. You're going in with all that experience, having sort of been there, walked the line, sort of that sort of talk. That's got to count for something in terms of that sort of day, because no matter how good an opposition might be in terms of natural results, that sort of feeling, that sort of week, that sort of tension before a game, you've experienced that before and you've experienced it twice. That must be so invaluable to bring to this county final.
Yeah, you'd hope it helps anyway, absolutely. But like you said earlier, there we've got a nice few lads that it's their first day out too. See their training last night, there was massive enthusiasm in the place, as there is going to be for county final. There's a great buzz about it. But yeah, you'd hope that it counts for something, but you never know. There's always that incentive of, it's the first time for Inagh Kilnamona. Can they get that massive buzz? You know, I can remember the buzz that we got off being there. So that'll be gone. Any advantage is gone straight away once the game is thrown in. That's gone.
And finally, Jack, I suppose Aidan McCarthy, will he or won't he or what? But let's say he does sort of play as yourself and Paul and other defenders. To get that sort of role, or to get that designated role, to curb probably was being the best player in the club championship so far this year in Clare. People say Aidan has been the standout sort of player. Does that sort of fill a defender with a great sense of pride and great sense of bite and excitement when the manager sort of trusts you as an individual to try and stop such a threat as Aidan?
Sure, look at Aidan is, we know he's gifted. He has all the ability in the world, and I suppose there's no one man going to stop Aidan. It'll have to be a team effort to try and slow him down, and we know it's not just Aidan. We know there's 5 other forwards there, or there's 15 other lads there or more even. So it'll have to be a collective team effort, absolutely.
Cheers.